it can be rather intimidating thinking about what it is that Christ is calling us to when he says, be salt and light. Maybe you don't have any sort of platform. You don't really have the relationships that would allow you to feel as though you've accomplished that. But today, in our discussion on Living the Message, we're going to talk about how everyone, and even the most surprising people, can fulfill what Christ calls us to when he calls the church to be salt and light. Join us today as we discuss this on Living the Message. Hey, this is Living the Message, where we discuss how the message of Christ might dwell among us richly. I'm Pastor Eric Targe, and I'm here with Senior Pastor of the Moody Church, Philip Miller. Hey, Philip.
Hey, Eric. How are you doing?
Doing well. We're in week 3 now of
right.
the Upside Down Kingdom, looking at what it is that Christ is calling us to. And we hit on this passage that I think is really, tell me if it's okay to say this, weird?
Yeah,
like it's
sure.
I feel it's weird. I know it's not, right? Because everyone talks about salt and light. Like there are churches that are named after it. There are ministries named. I think we have a ministry here, right? That's like salt and
that's right.
Light and salt, like all that stuff. But there's something a little bit weird about having salt and light take place right after the Beatitudes, where it seems to be focused more on like being meek, right?
Sure.
Being meek and mourning. Like when I think of salt and light, I tend to think of those who have the spotlight on them, right? Those who
influencers.
Get influencers. So how do these two work together? How can you be salt and light and be meek and mild and mourning? Like, those people don't tend to.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it does feel like a contrast, right? You feel like when we think of people that are like influencing the world, changing the world, it's like those are the go-getters, the trendsetters, the influencers, people with platforms. And then you look at Jesus' list of the Beatitudes, and it's the poor in spirit, the mourners, those who are, like you said, meek and humble and gentle and persecuted and sort of trodden upon in the world. And you say, wait a minute, how do those go together? What does it mean? How do we fit them together? And what's interesting is Jesus is saying those people, the very people he described in the Beatitudes, are the people, the blessed people, who are the salt and light in the world.
Okay.
And that's the same list in his mind. So we're the ones that kind of create the contrast. So then we have to say, okay, how is that? How does that work? And I think what's going on is Jesus is describing in the list of the Beatitudes people who don't have much in this world and yet have the kingdom of heaven, right? In other words, these are people who are going through the hardest kinds of things you face in life: mourning, emptiness, hunger, thirst, persecution, hardship, and yet they have the resources of the kingdom of heaven through Jesus Christ. And so they're metabolizing those resources and living out of a depth of resource in the midst of their hardship that doesn't make any sense to a watching world. So in other words, like we all get, if you have a bad slate of things happen in life, we can understand getting cynical and bitter and cranky. It makes sense to the world.
Yeah.
But what if you go through the hardest things in life and don't get bitter and don't get cynical?
Yeah.
And are cheerful and loving and pour yourself out and keep forgiving and serving other people? Like, that doesn't make sense, right? And so you have people who on an earthly scale, it doesn't make any sense that they would be happy, that they would be rejoicing, that they would have any sort of hope or joy or resources for living. And yet they do, because they're tethered to the life of the kingdom of heaven through Jesus Christ. So in other words, we're living through the hard things in life with the resources that are invisible. They're not of this world. Jesus would say to his disciples when he was talking to the Samaritan woman, I've had food you don't even know about. What is he talking about? He's talking about there's resources and nourishment and sustenance and strength available in the kingdom of heaven, and it's beyond food that's actually sustaining me in this moment. Yeah. And so he's living out of the resources of the kingdom of heaven. When we do that, when we go through all this hard stuff of life, but we live with the depth of resources in the kingdom of heaven, and we pour ourselves out with those resources into the world, people are like, how are they getting that? Where are they getting those resources from? And that is what it means to be salt and light.
So what you're saying is that our typical definition or understanding of salt and light, which can tend to be like, hey, a Christian is salt and light when they're bombastic, is inaccurate.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think it matches the list of the blesseds. So in other words, if I go into the world and I face all the hard things that are in this life, but I do so not just with the resources of this world, but the resources of the kingdom of heaven, the equation doesn't balance.
Yeah.
Right? So everyone understands that all the input I have, then I can spend that. Right? I get income and I spend it. The kingdom of this earth provides a certain amount of income and I spend it. Well, what if your spending exceeds your income, but you never go into debt because you have a resource bank in the kingdom of heaven? You can continue to love and pour yourself out, even though there's nothing coming into the bank in the kingdom of earth, right?
Yeah, I like that metaphor. That's
so
really helpful.
Yeah, so that's what I think he means when he's saying, you who are living in the kingdom of heaven in all the hard things of life are actually functioning in the world as salt and light. You're making a difference by your very presence as you metabolize the life of the kingdom of heaven. It's shaping and changing, redeeming, transforming the world, society, culture, neighborhoods, families. It's at work. Even when you don't see it happening or feel it happening, it's happening.
Can you give us maybe a little bit more of a tangible, clear definition of like what does it mean to be salt? What does it mean to be light? What is Jesus actually talking about?
Yeah.
What is he expecting of us?
So when it comes to salt, there were two main functions in the ancient world. One is salt was a preservative. Mm-hmm. It arrested decay. Right, so it was used medicinally. You could rub salt in a wound, for example, which is weird to us. We just think, oh, that's mean now. Well, at one point they did. They rubbed salt in the wounds in order to prevent infection. We have Neosporin and other things now, but they used salt. So salt arrested decay. It was also used on preservation of meats and foods and things like that because they didn't have refrigeration. And so salt its primary use was as a preservative. It kept decay from happening. And so that's a great metaphor for us, right? So in other words, we live in a broken world that is hurting, that is falling apart, that is decaying.
Yeah.
And it's everywhere. And so as a follower of Jesus, one of my jobs as salt is to go into my world, my sphere of influence, my family, my friends, my workplace, my neighborhood, my school, wherever I'm deployed, and I'm to look for broken things and hurting things and suffering things and things that are falling apart. And I'm supposed to help. I'm supposed to help heal, mend, restore, arrest the decay, pour myself out. That looks different for all of us, right? Some people adopt kids. Some people become doctors and medical missionaries. And some people, bake cookies for neighbors, and some people serve at a homeless shelter, and some people tutor the neighbor's kid next door who's falling behind in math, and the parents don't have time to do it, right? And in other words, I can be a healing presence everywhere I go. I can be in meetings at work, and I have a voice in something. And so, how do I steward that voice to promote healing and human flourishing wherever I go? That's
really
a good
helpful.
question.
So that there you're kind of talking about, you used that phrase before, incarnational holy presence. That's what you used in the message this past Sunday. And you're saying that happens when we do these things, when we volunteer at a nursing home or care for our neighbors, shovel their snow. Like there's a way in which we do that there.
Or even just kind words.
Yeah, like encouragement.
Like every interaction, every moment, when I go through the drive-thru and I interact with the guy handing me the hamburger, every moment, every interaction is a Jesus moment.
Yeah.
So how do I bring life? How do I bring encouragement? How do I bring healing into these relationships? That's really important. So that's the first function of salt.
Yeah.
Preservative. The second one is seasoning. Seasoning draws out the flavor in something. And this is kind of the work of the arts, right? So when we to draw out beauty from the world. In other words, the world that God has made, as broken as it is, has great beauty in it, right? There's goodness here. And we cultivate it, and we highlight it, and we draw it out, and we showcase and cultivate the goodness in the world. And so even something as basic as just gardening is kingdom work. Because I'm cultivating the goodness of the world that God made. I'm beautiful. When I paint my fence, right? When I add value and beauty to my neighborhood, when you see what I'm saying? Like I'm actually, this is kingdom work. It's like Adam and Eve in the garden, cultivating the garden is part of our job as followers of Christ in our kingdom mandate, to be salt, to draw out the flavor, to season the world around us.
Like the prophet Jeremiah says, of seeking the flourishing of the
That's
city.
right.
Like we're
right.
to make the place that we are beautiful, not simply say, well,
That's
this
right.
is all going to hell anyway.
Right.
Like we have to
Right.
invest in it.
So to be the salt of the earth means I'm drawing out and showcasing and curating the good and beautiful world, the good, the true, the beautiful that God has made.
Yeah.
That's part of my job as salt, right?
Yeah.
So that becomes very tangible, right?
Yeah. That's really interesting, because what it's telling us then is that Christians are called to do everything really well.
Whatever
right?
you do, work at it with all your
Yeah.
heart, is working for the Lord, not for man.
Yeah, because I think of that famous quote. You probably heard it, of Martin Luther, right? Who, when somebody asks him how to make Christian shoes, he says, well, the Christian cobbler doesn't make Christian shoes by chiseling little crosses, but by making the best shoes.
That's right.
And you'd say that falls under salt. Like it's
Yeah.
by doing everything best. What about light? Because
Yeah.
it tends to be in our minds that light is like, I have the spotlight on me, right? That's how we tend to think of light.
Sure.
Like I'm stealing the stage. I'm doing, like I'm
Right.
preaching the gospel. Like I think light, and
I'm a star, let me shine. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like I'm shining for Jesus, baby. But like, what would light be? Like, are we misunderstanding that as well?
Well, so light had two main functions. It still does today. It's first a deterrent and then a beacon. So in a deterrent, it's the reason you turn on lights when you go on vacation.
Yeah.
It's the reason you have a security light outside your house, right? I mean, we all know bad things happen in the dark, right?
Yeah.
And so light is a deterrent. It deters evil by its presence. It dispels the darkness. And so and Jesus talks about that, you don't hide the light. You let it shine, right? In other words, let it unfurl and beam out into the world, because it is a deterrent. And this is interesting, but righteous people, by their very presence, arrest the darkness. They keep it from getting as dark as it could be. Here's an example.
Yeah.
I was at a party a few weeks ago, and this guy was just swearing up a storm. Every other word was a swear word, and he eventually said, "So what do you do?" And I was like, "Well, I'm pastor at the Moody Church." And what was weird was his language from that moment on was clean. Like he just cleaned it up, right?
Yeah.
What's happening there, right? Well, part of it's a pastor thing or whatever, but
I've had that same experience.
Yeah. But what's going on? Like, people feel the conviction of righteousness when it's around, right? They respond to it and they adjust their behavior because it doesn't fit, right?
Yeah.
And there's a sense in which the holy people of God, because we are living rightly in the kingdom of heaven, as we're just scattered out into the world, there's a little bit of cleaning up that happens. There's a little bit of goodness that is preserved by presence. It's part of the common grace that God has in this world through his people. It keeps the world from getting as bad as it might otherwise get. There's a preserving, arresting, deterring that happens just by showing up.
So what might that look like practically if you recognize that your presence doesn't cause deterrent?
Yeah. I mean,
is there something on
I'm not sure
on
we
us?
always know it's happening.
Yeah.
People don't wear a sign that says, "Hey, by the way, I'm cleaning up my act around you."
Yeah.
But I do think when we live rightly, I do think people feel that there's an adjustment that they're making around. We do it. when
Yeah.
we're around other people. We're always trying to like make adjustments for people and make allowances for them, and kind of go, well, that's their story, so
Yeah.
it's awkward, but we figured it out. I think people are doing that around the people of God all the time, and I think again that's the presence of the light. It kind of keeps that stuff from running amok.
You said there's a second function.
Yeah, so the second function is a beacon.
A beacon.
This is when Jesus talks about the city on the hill.
Yeah.
It's a beacon. If you're lost in the desert at night and you see a city on the hill, it's going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
It's like, there it is. I can find my way home. There's hope. There's life. There's salvation on the horizon. Like I can see it, And so there's a sense in which the people of God also are present as hope. We live in the kingdom, which is here already in Jesus Christ, and yet is coming. The kingdom will come.
Yeah.
The world will be made right in wholeness and goodness and beauty forever. But we're like a little preview of the kingdom that's fully coming later. And that's hope. That's hope for a broken world, for a sin-ridden world. It's hope of salvation, the message of the gospel, the redemption of Jesus Christ. We go to proclaim that. We're his ambassadors. And so we proclaim hope and light in a dark world. And so our presence shines that. And of course, that's not just words, but it's how we model it as we raise our families. And all of that can be a light. People can look at our families and go like, there's something different there. To use Jesus' words, our light is shining before men that they might see our good deeds, the way we live, and glorify our Father in heaven. There's something different about those people. And it gives hope that the world could be different. And we're sort of that preview community, curating the way of Jesus that's coming in fullness, so that, one day it will be on earth as it is in heaven, as Jesus prays. That's the vision.
I think some people probably hear this or hear Jesus' words, though, and think, that's not me. I don't feel that. Or maybe they think, oh, that's totally me, but maybe it's not, right? So I know in the message, one of the things you talked about is Jesus is kind of attacking these two different polar opposites, right? Where some people move towards syncretism and some people move towards separatism. And one of the things you said is you can know that you're a syncretist if you think that separatists are the greatest evil, right? You might be leaning toward there. And likewise, on the opposite end, if you're you might be a separatist if you think the syncretists are like, oh no, they're really messing everything up. What are some of the other warning signs you think that someone might notice if they're not being salt and light? Yeah,
so quick definition. Syncretism is when we blend in with the world around us, right?
Yeah.
So syncretism, blend in with the world around us. It's like a chameleon. Sort of, it's just like, I don't want to be different than the world. I'm just going to kind of go with the flow, blend in, disappear.
Be in sync with them.
Be in sync up, right? Syncretism, nice, good definition. Separatism is when I separate out, right? Yeah. So this is a turtle posture. It's sort of like, I'm going to hunker down, big bad world, go away, just get in my bubble and stay there. And Jesus is actually skewering both of those, right? He says, don't lose your saltiness. You got to be contrastive with the world around you. Yeah. That's anti-syncretism, right? You can't blend in. You got to be distinct. Salt is only useful if it's totally different from the world. Like it acts on the world, not the world acting on it. If you lose your saltiness, it's useless. Just throw it out, trample it. It's no good. So we can't go there. Separatism, Jesus is addressing when he says, don't hide your light under a bushel. Like, who does that? Who puts a basket over the top of their candle? It's going to, number one, catch on fire. That's a bad idea. But it's selfish, right? The light is meant for all to see. And when you hide and sequester yourself, you lose your presence in the world. So Jesus is modeling in his life and in this metaphor of salt and light, a life of holy presence, of incarnation, of holiness under the Lord. Don't lose your identity, your saltiness, and presence in the world. Let your light shine. Yeah. So Christians are those who try to seek that center, right? That this is the pattern, the vision that Jesus is laying out. Not separatistic, not syncretistic, but this holy presence, holy under the Lord, fully engaged in the world, right? Fully proximate. And so I think you mentioned, like, how do you know if you're going one way or the other. If you're syncretistic, I think you're gonna notice that there are moments you have a little catch in your spirit of like, I know this isn't right, or I'm just gonna go with it, or in other words, there's the conviction of the Spirit comes in. There's something that you know is kind of wrong. It's kind of, but you just kind of go with it. You kind of go with the flow. Just sort of blend in. I think when we plow over those little conviction moments, those are signs that we're just folding in with the broader culture.
So if you find yourself self-justifying regularly and saying, "Oh, it's probably okay. It's probably okay," that's
and if you find yourself, I think, having very few friction points with the world, and this can happen all over the spectrum. But if you find yourself, your opinions are pretty neatly aligning with the majority opinion leaders in culture rather than Christ, those would be warning signs. So like, and that can be on both political left or right. Those are the big machines that are like creating the narratives today. If all of your views line up very tidily with the right, or all your views line up very tidily with the left, your worldview is probably being driven more by your cable news and social media and political agendas than it is by the Word of God. Because the Word of God is always, it's going to confirm some things in our narratives in the world, and it's going to confront other things. And unless you're experiencing the tension of that, you're probably just going with the flow. It's easy to just get in the river and float. It's much harder. If you're going upstream, you're going to feel the contrast. You're going to be like, everyone's going that way, but not me. That's different, you know? I think that's healthy when we feel those kinds of tensions. So those would be things to think about if we lean on the syncretistic side. On the separatistic side, I think it's much easier to diagnose. And that is, do I have non-Christian friends?
Ooh, that's a little too easy. I don't like that.
I think that's so simple.
Yeah.
Right? But if I'm in a bubble, if I'm in a Christian bubble, right, and I go to church and I live in all my kids' friends are Christians, and I hang out with Christians, and I drink Christian coffee, and I drink, like everything is, you know what I mean? But we're good at that. We create this little I watch Christian movies. I don't, you know what I mean? Like we have a little Christian subculture. If I stay in the subculture, and I really am not cultivating regularly relationships with people far from Jesus but near to me, that's a warning sign. I mean, it just means I'm too insular. I'm too under the basket, right? And I need to be out more in the broader world. And so some of us have mechanisms that propel us out. Like we have a job in maybe a secular space or something like that, or we live in a neighborhood and there's lots of people around us that, you know, don't follow Jesus. And those are good tools because they help us get out. Yeah. Someone like me or you, where a lot of our time, our jobs are in Christian bubble.
Yes.
It takes a lot of work to cultivate relationships with people far from Jesus. So like one of the things I do is I prefer to do business with non-Christians. So like the people that cut my hair, or if I have to get my hair cut, right? So let me go to build a relationship with somebody who doesn't know Jesus. I could surround myself with a whole bunch of Christians that can cut my hair and all that, but then I lose the opportunity to go do the work of
and building
of
a relationship with that person.
That's right.
Yeah,
because then I have an opportunity.
Being intentional about letting your light shine.
Because then I have an opportunity to shine. Because if I stay in the light, a candle in the light doesn't do much good, but a candle in the darkness can change the world, right? So I've got to get closer to darkness if I'm going to shine. And so but that takes work and intentionality.
Yeah, I think that's such a good way of thinking about it. Some people, I think, are very much in that sphere where they're like, especially now in 2022, where people are still, many of them, working from home, and they go from home to church. Like, what does it mean to interact? But to find a barber or a restaurant that you say, you know what, me and my family, or me, I'm going to commit to going here, and I'm going to build a relationship with the cashier or with the barista or any of these people and get to know them. There's a pastor on staff I know who does that incredibly well with a whole bunch of places in our area. He knows them by name and they know him, and it's quite incredible.
It's awesome. And what it means is taking whatever those transactional relationships are and just moving them into an actual relationship.
Yeah.
So it's just pausing with your waiter and just, you don't have to make it really awkward, but you could just say, hey, how long have you lived in the city? Where are you from? What's your story?
Yeah.
Do you have family? What did you do for the holidays? You just move it out of the transactional, you bring me water and bread and I mean, and I pay you $4 or whatever, right? It's move it out of the transactional into like an actual normal human interaction.
Yeah.
And then remember who they are. Yeah. Get their name, write it down if you need to, and come back and go, Jason, good to see you again. It'll blow their mind. Nobody remembers their names.
Yeah.
And then they're going to look forward to you coming, and and eventually you can ask, how can I pray for you? Or whatever,
Yeah.
I mean, you can nudge it along, but all of a sudden you're actively engaged in the kingdom work of God. As Jesus says, I'll make you a fisher of men. You're doing the work, right? And you're acting as salt and light.
Now, being salt and light can have risks, right?
Oh,
there are times where at work or in neighborhood things, you're going to feel like I should probably just go with the flow, or I should probably really separate. You're going to have those tendencies. Is there ever a time, Philip, where it's okay not to be salt, to say, you know what, I'm just not going to be salty today, or I'm not going to shine. Yeah, I'm just going to go with it. Is there ever a time where it's okay to blend in?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that's that chameleon syncretistic posture, or it could be hiding out as well, right? It's just I'm going to hunker down and hide away.
Call in sick.
Call in sick today. So here's what's weird is Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. I don't think we have an option. We can be unsalty salt, and we can be hidden light. But I don't think we get to change the fact that we are the people of God.
Yeah.
And whether we like it or not, we don't get sick days on that, I bought a car a few years ago, and it had from another pastor, and it had a fish on it. And I've never put a fish, the little Christian fish.
Oh, yeah.
I've never put a Christian fish on my vehicles because I don't drive very good, okay?
Yeah.
And so, and I don't want
I was just cut off by a fish.
I know, that's right. I don't
what are these?
Yeah. And so, then the Lord just convicted me because he's like, wait a minute, why? You have a fish on your whole life. Every moment, every interaction, you don't get a day off of being salt and light, a representative of Christ in the world. You don't. You don't. Every moment of every day, you're on, because it's who we are as the people of God. And so I don't think Jesus would give us that pass,
Yeah.
And I think maybe what we need to do is learn that you don't even have to be on your best day to metabolize the kingdom of heaven. That's the list of the Beatitudes. You can be poor in spirit with nothing good going on, in weakness and emptiness and hunger and mourning, and have nothing going right. And yet, because God is near, because you are still in the love of the Father, you are still saved and redeemed by Jesus Christ, you still are the residence of the Holy Spirit, who groans with you with words that cannot be expressed, who prays even when you don't even know how to pray for yourself. And in all the emptiness, you're in the weakness of all of that, you're actually strong. You're actually full. You're actually alive, because the kingdom resources of heaven are yours. And so in the emptiness and on the bad days, there is a God who is with you, who is near, and who is pouring his life into you. And if you would just drink it in, metabolize it, you actually shine. Because the world doesn't know what to do when you have a really, really bad, awful day, and yet rejoice in the kingdom of heaven. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
when we think of salt and light, this is not something we pull our bootstraps up on, or we really just try hard or gut it out. Jesus is teaching us in the Beatitudes, you fall into the kingdom of heaven. You sink into it. You collapse, because that's what grace is. Yeah. Grace catches you when you fall. And a life that is lived that has nothing much to stand on and yet is full of strength and power, because the kingdom of God is for poor, weak, miserable people by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. That paradox shines. That paradox is salty. That paradox is what changes the world.
So the question we're left with is, are you living as though you have a Jesus fish on your life at all times? Are you willing to be salt? Does that mean maybe holding the door for someone on the busy street of Michigan Avenue? Or maybe it's just being light to that person in the call center when you are incredibly frustrated, being a person of joy there. Oh, we're called to be salt and light. It's who we are. It's not who we try to be. It's who Jesus made us. Well, I hope that you were encouraged, equipped, and enabled throughout this conversation to live the message with us. If you enjoyed this conversation, check out the message from this past week. If you have questions that you want to submit, remember that you can always text those in or email them at livingthemessage@moodychurch.org. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating and a review. We do read those, and we're always encouraged by them. Thank you for joining us. Now go and live the message.